The unprecedented insomnia virus is sweeping the world, and those affected cannot sleep even if they are exhausted. Initially, they suffer from mental distraction and slow reactions, but after several days without sleep, most patients become irritable and quick-tempered and may develop a strong tendency towards violence. However, this is not the most terrifying part. When everyone starts suffering from insomnia, various accidents will inevitably occur, and the social system will face a crisis of collapse. The story begins at a famous ski resort in Sweden. Suddenly, the cable car that was supposed to move forward malfunctioned and started to reverse wildly. The tourist quickly realized something was wrong, but the staff stood in the control room stunned, leaving the car spinning wildly under the carabao, while the passengers screamed as they rushed toward the snow. By the time the rescuers arrived, the accident had caused more than 10 people to be seriously injured, and images of the incident spread online, attracting people's attention. Dr. Irene had just finished treating the injured when a policeman rushed in to ask for help. They discovered something unusual in the behavior of the ski resort staff and suspected that they had consumed prohibited substances. The policeman kept asking why the stop button was pressed, but Lucas shook his head, indicating he couldn't do it. Irene stepped forward to measure his blood pressure, and the man stared at his hands, muttering, "They are growing." Irene opens the flashlight and found that Lucas's eyes were bloodshot, and he was in a state of excitement and weakness, clearly indicating physical exhaustion from prolonged insomnia. Irene advised Lucas to rest more, but he said again that he couldn't. Irene ran to explain to the officer that Lucas should be taken to the hospital immediately for treatment, but the officer insisted on taking him to the police station. The police car hadn't gone far when Lucas lost control of his emotions, forcing the officer to stop the car. Amid the chaos, Lucas suddenly opened the car door and rushed toward the forest by the roadside. Ironically, such a serious incident occurred at the ski resort, while the leadership of the largest pharmaceutical company in Sweden was celebrating at a dinner party after just receiving a multi-billion order from the Ministry of Health, undoubtedly a brilliant achievement for the group. The CEO was at the party, moving among the attendees with a constant smile on his face, until Matti from the Research and Development Department burst into the hall. He told the CEO with a serious face that the new drug developed by the company contains deadly risks and that production must be stopped immediately, and reported, "You should know that there are many senior officials from the Ministry of Health on site," and the CEO took the report symbolically and asked security to expel Matti. At this time, steam var massiva. Before them, disaster, strange phenomena began to appear in the streets. The girl in the gym saw with her own eyes an older sister nearby running frantically on the treadmill until she exhausted her energy and dashed away. But her face was always enthusiastic, indicating that she wanted to tire herself out through intense sports until she slept. While the Minister of Health was watching the news, his forehead became more furrowed, as insomnia cases in the city had significantly increased, and major hospitals were almost full. At that time, he did not realize that this was not just a coincidence, but an impending disaster, spreading in secret. Dr. Irene was meeting her friend, and suddenly received a strange phone call, not expecting that the caller was Lucas, who had escaped from the police during the day. His tone was agitated and hurried, and he was urgently pleading with Irene to save him. Irene was dissatisfied with the superficial manner in which the police handled the situation, so she chose not to report it, but instead went alone to the address Lucas provided. The door to the room was ajar, and Irene cautiously called Lucas's name as she stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet, and there was no one there. The kitchen faucet was running, so she quickly turned it off. Suddenly, a faint sound came from the refrigerator, and Irene dared to open the refrigerator door. At that moment, she saw a light on in the bathroom, and when she opened the door, she saw Lucas lying motionless on the floor, his body cold and stiff. At this time, the CEO of the pharmaceutical company was sitting on the plane returning to the headquarters and finally remembered the technical report by Mattis. It turned out that the technician had discovered a leak in the raw material storage tank during equipment maintenance, which could contaminate nearby groundwater and led to catastrophic consequences for the public. The executive realized the seriousness of the problem and wanted to contact his subordinate, but unfortunately, there was no signal on his mobile phone. Suddenly, the plane shook without any warning, and all the passengers exchanged glances, but he did not know that the captain had lost consciousness for some time, and his whole body was limp. His bloodshot eyes looked exactly like Lucas's eyes at the ski resort. Unfortunately, the only official who had the chance to know the details was rapidly descending with the plane toward the ground. The next morning, the Minister of Health saw the news and jumped off of bed immediately. The news of the plane crash spread throughout the country, and 190 people died instantly. The most terrifying thing is that no one knows this accident is related to insomnia. Meanwhile, Irene's friend's wrinkled eyes also started to redden, and she thought it was just lack of sleep and paid no attention to it. But this common disregard is what made the situation completely spiral out of control. The Swedish cabinet held an emergency meeting, and a report presented by the medical system made everyone panic. In just 10 days, 4,000 people were diagnosed with the same neurological disease. The primary symptom of this disease is only one, which is the inability to sleep. Initially, the patients only suffered from difficulty sleeping and frequent early waking. Then it progressed to an inability to sleep throughout the night. Patients began experiencing memory loss and attention deficit, and eventually it develops into anxiety, irritability, and even aggression. With the increasing number of cases, panic began to spread throughout the entire community. People started talking about this mysterious disease online and called it waka. If it weren't for the plane crash that called the attention of the authorities, no one would have realized how terrifying this disease is. An inexperienced pilot loses control while flying, and it is expected that any high-risk profession will become a powder keg ready to explode at any moment. More complicated is that the Ministry of Health has not yet found the cause of the disease, and the number of patients is continuously increasing, and everyone feels that this disease seems contagious. The Minister of Defense sadly made a stunning statement suggesting that this is not a natural disease, but rather a biological attack or even a type of unknown sonic weapon. Meanwhile, outside the municipal office, my curly-haired friend Irene was preparing the Prime Minister's agenda, but the senior supervisor came to give his instructions. The curly-haired one felt angry for no apparent reason and clarified that she was the Prime Minister's secretary, not subordinate to him, but the supervisor suddenly approached and began mocking. The curly-haired one couldn't contain her anger, so she grabbed a penholder and stabbed him forcefully in the neck. After that, the two were urgently taken to the hospital. The annoying manager was not in life-threatening danger. Irene arrived at the hospital room immediately and saw her curly-haired friend lying weakly on the bed. The doctors had previously given her a sedative, but she was still unable to sleep. It was clear she also suffered from insomnia. At this time, the Prime Minister was holding a memorial party for the plane crash victims in the town hall, but none of the attendees noticed that the Prime Minister's eyes were bloodshot and his features reflected an undeniable fatigue. He had always spoken fluently, but he stumbled over his words, and when the speech reached its midpoint, the Prime Minister suddenly collapsed to the ground without any warning. The audience spoke in low voices, as they had faced many strange things recently, and although they were shocked and furious in their hearts, it did not cause much disturbance. But no one expected that the Prime Minister had died due to failure to save him, and the reason was sudden death from extreme exhaustion. However, when analyzing his blood samples in the lab, traces of an unknown virus infection were discovered, and panic was spreading in the gymnasium. Since someone ran frantically on the treadmill last time, some people in the hall have started showing similar symptoms. At this moment in a dark room, the man wearing a baseball cap told Wilson as they have received reliable information, and as there is not much time left until the next attack, the person with the cap needs someone to cooperate in completing a secret mission, and this person must have a strong engineering background and be unaffected by media propaganda and political stances. They secretly observed for a long time and believed that Wilson was the perfect choice to complete the mission. After promises of great rewards, Wilson finally accepted the mission. The advice of the Hatwari often echoes in his ears, as behind every crisis lies a greater opportunity. This operation was classified as top secret, and no details are allowed to be leaked. If that is violated, it won't be Wilson alone facing danger, but even his family. In the pharmaceutical company's lab, the researcher was very busy, as she discovered that the pressure in raw material tank number 4 was very low, but the supervisor Marty hadn't come to work for 2 days. The researcher had no choice but to call to inquire, and then she learned that the reason was Marty's delay in equipment maintenance, which ultimately led to a leak in raw material tank number 4. Marty was scared despair. The adjusted water in his home and found that the water source with the entire city had been contaminated. Marty did not expect that his negligence would lead to a disaster of this magnitude, and now he found on the debt his atonement for his mistake. The next morning, the researcher rushed with the documents to the town hall, but the Minister of Health, Chris, received an emergency call from the Center for Disease Control. Viral materials had leaked from the pharmaceutical company and had contaminated the city's drinking water for 2 weeks. Chris couldn't accept it at first and imagined the news might be false, but the other party said it was a report from an employee inside the pharmaceutical company, and they provided samples, and now the lab is analyzing them to confirm. After Chris ended the call, he felt like his head was going to explode. We should know that the pharmaceutical company, where the problem occurred, frequently dealt with him when he was the Minister of Health, and he even gave them a huge deal worth billions of dollars. At this time, all the major hospitals in the city were overcrowded with patients, and the prominent doctors and experts could do nothing about it. Even with more sedatives being administered, the patients could not sleep. The only thing the doctors could do was wait for their condition to worsen until they were moved to the morgue to make room for a new batch of patients. Fortunately, it wasn't long before the pathology lab finally sent the latest test results for the samples. In this virus attacks nerve cells frantically, leading to people's inability to enter a state of sleep. The most terrifying part is that the attacked cells will die in large numbers until the frontal lobe of the brain is damaged, causing the affected individuals to lose memory or even behave abnormally. Chris was more interested in knowing when a treatment method could be found. The head of the experiments shook his head. They are sequencing the virus, and the best outcome is finding a way to prevent infection. It won't be possible in short term. The premise of Chris retains officers office. I to the eyes am when if they said This infection incident has clearly risen to the level of national security, and he is compelled to disclose all facts to the public. This virus is contagious and can be deadly, and the population is asked to stay at home as much as possible and reduce gatherings. But not everyone realized that the destruction of these virus is much greater than expected. If anyone shows distraction while working, it could lead to a disaster. In the past 2 days, unexpected incidents have occurred at several places in the city, and many citizens have taken to the streets to protest. To make matters worse, there are COVID organizations trying to exploit the opportunity to create chaos. This prime minister has only been in office for 1 week, and he has become extremely busy, with bloodshot eyes. This was the first episode of Awakening. This drama consists of only 6 episodes, but its duration is very limited, and the next episode is expected to witness the grand finale. We hope that friends who love the series will continue to follow, and we'll see you in the next episode.